So Ayin Beis, volume 1, we're in the middle of chapter 86, page Kuf Samagdal, 164. So we're in the middle of the discussion of Sefirah from the word mispar, number, and it's a long analysis of what numbers mean. Okay, so the Rebbe Rashab is quoting the Mittler Rebbe Siddur, the Alter Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe Siddur, and Zecher Rav Tuvcha Yaviu. That what Zecher Rav Tuvcha, that Rav Tuvcha, Rav, refers to the abundance and of goodness, which refers to Tevis Yisod, all the hashpahs, every transmission, every all the energy that flows to this world goes through all these different levels of tzimtzumim. He broke it down into 4 general ones, and that's Rav Tuvcha. And Zecher Rav Tuvcha is that we can't directly appreciate in the lower worlds, in Biyah, the actual malchus, which goes like the core root of this whole transmission. So we have Zecher Rav Tuvcha, and with that he gave an example of 2 people. One person counting a large number. The number he uses is 10,000. Or 10,000s rather. That's 100,000. And so he's actually doing the counting. And then there's someone he reports to and says there's 10,000. Just that short expression, 10,000. So when you look at it, just the word 10,000 just doesn't look much larger than 1 is a number. But it symbolizes, like he says, a zecher to something far greater. This is the example that he uses. And the difference is that the person who actually does the counting has the malchus. He's experiencing the thing itself. And the other person just has a so-called a reflection, a symbolic way of measuring it. And the Rebbe Rashab breaks it down that both of them have mispar meruba, mispar hakelel. One is obviously appreciates the whole, both in the details and the general number, in the full magnitude, the echus, the quality of the thing that's being counted. And the other one's focuses primarily on the quantity of what's being counted. And this is what he calls the mispar in Eidus and mispar in Kalim. In Eidus, the mispar is really quality. Not ribui as in a whole bunch, but ribui as in intensity, as in quality, as a higher state. And that's why sometimes it says that the numbers, when you talk numbers, yechidus, asidus, the higher you go, the greater the number. Because in Eidus, the numbers are higher above. And as the energy diminishes and goes lower, it's less air. Less meaning, in other words, less intensity. It's similar to what he said about Maila Mata, if you remember when he spoke about air. The Maila Mata hierarchy is determined on the diminishing, how much energy there is, how close to the source it is. But you have to also remember that before he said that the distinction between the spheres are also determined that they're etzem malchus, that the Chachma and Bina are fundamentally different, they're not just diminished. But regardless, so let me just see what he said before. Yeah. And mispar hakelim, on the other hand, what's in malchus, mispar hakelim is referring to a number that focuses more on actual quantity. That there's more ribuy eschalkus, more distinction. So when you say in ribuy, you're not saying more distinctions, you're saying more power. In kelim, you say more distinctions. More kelim means more like oisius, like machshava and dibur. Machshava, and the idea is more powerful, and there's less distinction between one detail and another. In dibur, when you start speaking it, you have to spell it out in details. So when you say dibur has more what? More kelim. Machshava would have more eir. So it all depends on what language you're speaking. That's where we're up to on page Kuf Samach Dalet. And all this, let's just put it in context, is coming to explain, as I said, what means mispar in general, Sefirah of Atzeret, and all this is to explain what is Sefirah in Negulim. So he began by prefacing by saying that there's Sefirah in Sefirah Agnuzis, and he's really coming to explain that Sefirah have many dimensions in them. That's what it comes down to. Right here we already see 2. Even in the number, there's number as distinction, and then the gvul. There's number as revelation of God's power to create the finite. So that's where we're at right now. So we'll continue on page Kuf Samach Dalet. Any questions? Is it clear? When you read it, it's a lot more dense, but when you start, analyzing it, think it's manageable.
When you talk about the Eretz, the difference between Bina and Chochmah, how would you define it?
Both ways, two ways.
No, Eretz.
Okay.
Eretz Bina.
That in Chochmah the misput is higher if you talk from Eretz, and lower Kalim.
Okay.
It's only a spark. If you talk from Kalim perspective, there's less. One would be Chochmah and 1,000 would be in Bina. Because Bina breaks it. It's relatively simple. It's just that it's just exactly. In other words, when you look at let's put it this way. I'll give you an example. You say you're a teacher in a class. You have two students. One is shy, never speaks, very rarely. The other one speaks a lot. So today, people are not trained. Usually say the shy ones, the quiet ones are like stupider. They don't say anything. In my days, for sure, it was like that. But someone who's trained, or someone who's a little, is more sensitive, says, 1 second, maybe this one has a lot more. Sometimes the shy one can have a lot more to say. So someone will say, how do we measure these two students? How do you measure them? So you could say, I measure based on what they say. This one speaks, this one doesn't. But if you're a person that's, a person, pitera, the truth answer has to be, there's two ways to measure. You can't just measure based on so-called what you see and what's revealed. You have to measure. If you measure on let's say, brain power, you have to find another way to measure it. My point I'm trying to say is that there's two ways to measure the value of something. One way is what you see, basically. When I don't just mean what you see. I mean to say the breakdown of something in details. Another value is something that is far more quality, and quality is a whole different way to measure it. Yeah. Now you could have both technically, but often they not to contradict. But sometimes one is at the expense. People out of quality have less quantity, and vice versa. Basically it's really two ways of measuring. As far as the avodah of all of this goes, we're going to learn now the avodah, but it's really coming down to how we look at Elam Hazeh. There's an expression, more Rabbi Masach Hashem, more Gadol Masach Hashem. So Chassidus says, Rabu is Kamus. It's like when you look at, wow, the Eibishter created millions of stars. Pashu B'Gashmi is millions. So it shows you, it's the spilus from the pure volume. And more Gadlu is Gadlus. Not how many, but Echus, quality. Some people interpret Rabu as the number and Gadlu how large. The sun is large. But Gadlu is also Echus. So both from a point of view in Avodas Hashem teach us things, Kamus and Echus. But you can't put them side by side and say this is how we measure. That's the key thing we learned in the beginning of this chapter. Because what are you talking here? You can't talk about measuring volume like you measure quality. There are different types of measuring. This is called Mispar Eidus, this is called Mispar HaKelim. There was a guy, you see him in the pictures of the Frierdiker Rebbe, when the Frierdiker Rebbe was in Lakewood. The Frierdiker Rebbe is saying, you can see with a mic, there's a guy standing with a mustache on the side. You see him in a lot of pictures from in America. He's one of the Frierdiker Rebbe's supporters. He was a real chassid in many ways, a chassidish. But I heard that he would go out between sichos and smoke. He stood right near the Rebbe. And some people, had a problem with that. So they asked the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe said, hot greise eres and kleine kelen. That's what he said. Which wasn't justifying what he did. I mean to say, what he did is not a contradiction. He's got a lot of eres, but he hasn't yet figured out how to manifest it. So I'm just saying, there's ways. It's in practical terms, there's ways to use this as like how you'd measure. That's why I used the example of students. It's measuring quantity and quality, and it's hard to do that. For us, it's easy to measure quantity. That's why I said teachers. You look at you mark a test, see two tests. Hey, this one answered 90% right. This one answered 50% right. But if you know the students, and you know the effort, and you know the quality, it's a whole different story. You measure differently. It doesn't take away from one. It depends what you're measuring. You have a tall person and a short person. Someone say, who's bigger? The short person can be, the Rebbe is shorter than some people. So the answer will be, it depends what you're measuring. What's messed? A god was medaf mesten is the chechnish ichmer a god. That one with the yachatz. Okay, we move on. So that's the context. Gvul, mispel. Okay. So top of page Kuf Samach Daled, we stopped by Omnom. Okay? So this is the last thing we just learned. We learned that there's mispel in Eres, there's mispel in Kalim. Basically, they reflect different things. One reflects, we'll call the quality of godliness. The other one reflects the structure, the distinct structure. In using the example I've been using with the artist, you could say the mispel Eres is where the artist is still in the place where it's closer to his vision of what he wants, the image. So there is already a structure, but it's not the focus on the structure, it's the focus on what he wants to convey. And the Kalim are, the focus is what exactly do we need now? What colors, what shapes and forms. And if you remember, he said in Kalim itself, it's negated to what we're going to learn now, there's also the Kalim higher than malchus, is like the colors of the light. They're still light oriented, focused, and then the Kalim of malchus is more already Kalim in function, what they're going to achieve. Later, if you recall, we learned about Primis HaKelim, Chutzenis HaKelim. Remember, a Keli, there's the Keli as it contains the whatever liquid it's holding, and there's Keli as you drink from it, the function that it has. So the same type of idea, that there's like shem ha'etzem and shem ha'pu'ula. So, which is the name. It's the name of something is like a Keli, but it's describing the thing instead of its function. Function is already, as he said, pu'ul is chutz min ha'etzem. Every function that's outside of the thing itself. So if someone says to you, what do you do? Who are you? They give you a business card. That's their function. That's what you do, not who you are. But most people confuse who they are with what they do. Right? Who you are is a far more complicated question than what you do. Okay. You want to listen to the Discourse? Yeah. So a guy's asked his friend, what do you do? He says, I'm looking for a job. I'm sorry. Wait, I messed it up. No, he says to him, what do you do? He says, I work for my brother. He says, what does your brother do? He's looking for a job. Okay. I know a lot of people like this. It's not even the guy looking for a job. I was in 770 a while back, and one of the aniyim, the beggars came over to me. A new guy, I didn't recognize him. We have here the furniture. And I said to him, I have nothing on me. He said, so go get a job. Okay. So I did not insult him. I smiled to myself. I thought to myself, so he thinks this is his job, right? Okay. He has a job already. Okay. Okay, so the last line was V'inyan Riba Kelim, malchus Yidus. That's al derech moshel dibur ha-machshava. Okay. So machshava, the eir is beribui, but the kelim are b'miut, and in the dibur is the other way around. Omnam ha'inyan ba'aveda. Omnam always means a qualification. However, omnam. So what's the qualification? Omnam ha'inyan ba'aveda yesh leimer. However, the inyan naveda, we'll figure out what this omnam is, hopefully, as we read on. Yesh leimer, we can say kamesha kasum makamacher. Remember, till here, basically, was not actually the language, was an analysis of the siddur of the Mittler Rebbe, the Maraf Tufcha. So now he says, Omnam yesh leimer naveda yesh leimer kamesha kasum makamacher, like it says elsewhere, be'inyan halos man de eres v'halos man de kelim. Ayin Beis bechinas mesirat nefesh. In the inyan of halas man, mayim nukvin of eres, and halas man of kelim, that there's two levels of mesirat nefesh. Okay, what's halas man? Halas man is, we know, hamshachas mad, mayin tchurin, which means like the waters of the Zachar, masculine waters, liquids, waters, and Mayim Nukfin. I mean, in Kabbalah, it's essentially the language what we call Asusa de La'ila and Asusa de L'Tata. The Hamshachas Mad is when it generates from above, the Mashpiyah. Allah Asman is when the Mayim Nukfin, the cave, the Makabal, she generates. Like we say, Ishik Isazriya, like in the Kutei Teira. So it depends who initiates. For example, a Pesach is considered to be Asusa de La'ila. Nigla Hashem Malach Malachim, and he took the Jews out of Mitzrayim. Sefirah Seimer is a Maveda Mamatla Mailand, Chedeshir, that we do our part. You always have this type of thing. For example, the Gemara says that there's Meidor Abel Araisa, that you could still have a taina that the Matan Teira was Kofalem Hakakigis. The Eibishter forced it upon them. He imposed it because it was from above Matan Teira. Comes Purim, and Purim we learn Kim V'Kibla Yehudim. They were Mekayim on their own. That's a mesirat nefesh from below. So basically, there's two ways of how any type of avodah begins. Sometimes it begins with the generating from above, sometimes from below. You always need all. Sometimes when you have a susa leila from above, which means like a moment of grace. The Eibishter gives someone a gift and awakens them. And then, of course, the goal is that it should inspire you, and then you have to, because it's not going to be retained. Remember, susa leila from above always is not internalized, so it's easy to dissipate. On the other hand, from below may not reach as high, but it's yours because you initiated it. So really, it comes down to chassidus. In the end of the day, it goes like this: a susa leila should bring out a susa l'tata, which in turn brings a higher susa leila, which in turn brings the asar shlim, another higher susa leila that you can't even reach, which is like the shar hachamishim. So when we here's the perfect example. You have Pesach is a Susa Leila, Nisan, Mamayel Lamata. Then comes Iyar, Mamat Lamayel Susa Latata. You count 49. Then comes 50. You can't count. There's already a Susa Leila that came through your Susa Latata. And then comes Matan Teira, which brings even higher levels. That's really generally how the picture goes. But bottom line is, we have two. Generally it's two. So he says the difference between. So we're not talking about Hamshachas Mad here. We're talking about in Aveda Mamat Lamayel itself, in Asus L'Tata, meaning you're initiating from below. There's two types. There's initiating from the level of Eir, and there's initiating from the level of Kalim. We'll soon see where he's going with this. And these, he says, are two types of mesirat nefesh. We have something similar, just for comparative purposes, if you remember the two effects of the Makif Kloli. The Makif of Ak, Adam Kalim, affects mesirat nefesh of the Eir, of the Neshama. And the Makif of Tiri Law, before the Tzimtzum, the Igla Gadol, affects mesirat nefesh of the Guf. When we actually give of our Guf, which is Akedus Yitzchak, or fasting, Yom Kippur, and so on. I'm just saying that's an example of two types of mesirat nefesh. I don't know if it's exactly the same two, but just for context purposes. So he says these are two types. He's going to say what they are. Now, of course, the connection here is Eris and Kalim. He's talking now Veda, what he's talked till now about the mispur of Eris and Kalim, of number, quality and quantity, basically. He's now applying this in Aveda, what it is in Aveda. So he says, Aleph, Echad, Aleph, the nefesh the nefesh alikis. The first one is mesirat nefesh of that divine soul. Limser nafshi be'echad. So there's the expression we have when you say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Echad, that limser nafshi be'echad. The kavana of echad is that you're ready to give your nefesh. Shezeu halos man de'eris. This is the soul, the divine soul. Nefesh alikis is connected to chelik elikam mal mamish. And when it says Shema Yisrael, Hashem Echad, the neshama has that inclination, that hunger, that thirst to give itself all the way to God. Nefesh alikis. That's halos man of eris. V'abeis. Mesirat nefesh the nefesh habamis. The giving of the sacrifice, or the giving of the soul of the nefesh habamis. Nefesh, it's also nefesh. Hu inyan ubechol nafshecha shezeu halos man the kelim. This is an initiation from below of the containers. So that's two things. Hu inyan bittul hayesh, and that's bittul hayesh, as opposed, of course, to nefesh alikis is bittul mitzias. So we're saying Shema Yisrael Hashem Echad. Echad is saying is mesirat nefesh of the divine soul. Then you say V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha b'chol nafshecha. What's nafshecha? What is it adding? Nefesh habamis. Obviously, it's we have to look there for more details. Now you could say, one second, since when does the nefesh habamis interested in mesirat nefesh? We know it's all interested in itself. But if you remember, we learned earlier that we're talking about avodah here. We're not talking about on its own, obviously. It's avodah of getting the nefesh habamis to give. Because it's not enough to just have the nefesh elokis to be connected. So we're not...
And nothing was happening.
Right. Yeah. So we learned earlier, we learned how the nefesh elokis piles on the nefesh habamis and avodah. The nefesh habamis should feel broken even to the point of helplessness and resignation. And that mesirat causes it to bring up the highest levels. So in other words, the nefesh habamis on its own, obviously, like he says in Tanya, is interested in itself. But the avodah of a person is not just to ignore the nefesh habamis; it's to have the nefesh habamis also feel how what's the word, inferior and meaningless its desires are. The Elam Haz is meaningless to the point that nefesh habamis also is awakened to give of itself. But that only bittul hayesh. You can't expect from the nefesh habamis complete, total sacrifice, total suspension of self. So it's still a yesh, but the yesh is being harnessed, so to speak. So, for example, when a person uses his ego, let's say to teach chassidus, like the Mittler Rebbe said, Atzibel is often divan, or a shliach is satisfied with his work, and his nefesh habamis is also satisfied. It's perfectly fine. It's part of the avodah is also to make sure that nefesh habamis is, because better than nefesh habamis, at least is directed to something of kedusha, right, rather than something the opposite. So that's the goal. The goal is not just, in other words, to feed a person's divine part, but also to affect the nefesh habamis. What I just referred to, I remember exactly where it is. What page? Samach Beis area.
Talks about the nefesh of the good.
Yeah, that for sure. But there's another piece.
Well, that should be.
Yeah, and I think it's right. I think it's later than that. Where is it about the nefesh habamis, nefesh elokis? Okay, I'll look for it later. So anyway, I'm just elaborating to explain two types of mesirat nefesh. So this is bittul hayesh. But neshama is the biyah. Now he's saying neshama is of biyah, which is neshama is lower than atzilus. Remember, zecher. This is not as the sefiros of atzilus. Neshama is of biyah tzirasi. Ikar avodah, the primary avodah, who ba bittul the nefesh habamis. The primary avodah is the nullification, is the sublimation of the animal soul.
Then it's in that area over there.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. But it's bittul hayesh. Bittul hayesh means yesh is the ego, the sense of self, the sense of self-consciousness. That there's a sublimation of that. Okay. Like he says about this in the Maimer Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashanah Terav, which is not part of Hemshech Ayin Beis. Because Hemshech Ayin Beis begins Shvus Terav. So the beginning of Ayin Beis was Rosh Hashanah. He says that's where this Inyan is discussed. Okay. K'maimer ha'maschel v'yemer lech lecha. B'maimer ha'maschel v'yemer lech lecha. Because it's a Hemshech. In other words, it starts with Rosh Hashanah and goes to the Maimer v'yemer lech lecha. So looking there, I'm sure will help us understand this. Okay. V'zeu de b'chinas malchus u'b'chinas ribui hakelim. And that's the meaning that in malchus is a abundance of containers. And the levels that are higher than malchus, b'chinas mispa meruba u'mitzad ha'er. Higher than malchus mispa meruba, when the person himself was counting the details, is from Eir, Shu b'chinas ribui ha'er. It's the intensity of energy. For who are mispr be'etzem ha'mahus, hayne ba'er shehu atzmi. That's the number in the etzem mahus, in the core essence of the entity, and that's the air which is an atzmi, not just in the kelim, which is more external expression, outer expression. Let's read this to see where he's going with this. Okay, so basically the avodah with the nefesh habamis is coming from malchus, because malchus is mamshech and biyah, and that's the kelim. U'metzad kelim u'b'chinas misper mu'at. And from the perspective of the kelim, it's a misper mu'at. it's only like the number 10,000, 100,000. Because the Kalim, as we said, the Kalim are very few there in the Eir level. It's the diminishment and the lower number of the containers. In other words, when the containers look at, let's say, machshava, where you said chochma bina, but let's say machshava, the asis of dibur, in dibur, Kalim are very dominant. There's a lot of Kalim. But how does dibur look at machshava? It's a misper mort. Because in machshava there's not that much. Which in the example is, the guy who actually counts the details and actually has them, then gives you a report. There's 100,000. That report is mitzad eris, it's mort. Mitzad kalim, it's 100,000, and you can break it down and so on. But it's all it's in volume now. It's no longer the quality that it was in step one. That's basically what he's saying here. What's the connection to the avodah? I'm not sure yet. Let's see where it goes. Okay. V'hu b'chinas haklal shekodem b'mayla ha'prat. And this is the klal that precedes b'mayla in quality, the details, which were hainu b'chinas protei hakelim the malchus. Meaning the detailed kalim, the breakdown of the kalim of malchus. So what's the klal that precedes it? Is the number that's said, that's a summary. It's a total sum number. Let me read it and then I'll explain. Which is b'chinas klal. Like dibur, like I just said, is a detailed breakdown compared to machshava, which is a form of klal. We're not talking about the pratim in the machshava, which is eris. Understand what I'm saying? In other words, in the example, remember the example was, the guy counts. He counts himself the objects. So we said that is a form of godless. He appreciates it. Then we said he also has a call before the prat when he knows the number before he counts. When he's counting, what I was explaining here, that counting is counting of quality, not of quantity. He's actually counting it, but he's appreciating the quality. Whereas in the lower level, the guy who just has the numbers, just has the number as a zecher, just has like this, and he counts, he's counting primarily kalim and quantity. He's explaining the mashal that remember the shtayim shemab, the two top ones is misper eris, and the two bottom ones is misper kalim. But in each one, there's two things. There's the misper kalil, which is just a sum. So that's the misper kalil of eris, and there's the misper hamaruba of eris, which is the appreciation of the quality. Then there's the misper hamaruba kalil of the quantity. That's just a number 100,000, and there's misper hamaruba of quantity, the breakdown. So it's really that's what he's saying here. He's just applying it to the levels that we're talking about. So eris of Atzilus, higher than malchus, we're talking is the first two. Eris of malchus, kalim of malchus, the number in malchus is referring to the last two. And avodah, that's what is mesirat nefesh of the nefesh abamis, and the mesirat nefesh of the kisses of the higher one. I still don't know why it was an omnam, and I still don't know what really. Okay, let's see. I mean, I'm sure we're in the middle of it. I'm just keeping the flow here. This is very dense. If you read it line by line, because it's like it has to all be spelled out. Okay, so that's machshava and dibur. Fine. If you do it, I'm sure, by the way, that this piece was written. This was added later. I see from the language. It's like the Rebbe Rashab added probably on the second edit for Havana purposes, because it's written such kitzur. And if you think about it, when he was speaking before about Eretz and Kelm, you see he goes back and forth there. So because he's like tying up all the knots here. That's what it seems to me. I may be wrong. I'm just saying, if you fly the flow, it's not the same type of signin like in earlier Mamorim. That's what it appears to me. But that doesn't change what we got to do here, which is figure this out. Okay, so that's it. So Yidua, because right now if you do it, the Kelm says b'chinas machshava. L'cheda, that should have been said earlier, when he brought the first example of machshava and dibur. But anyway, but fine. So now, you do it. So machshava. And b'chinas machshava, kelim of atzilus are the level of thought. The kelim of malchus is b'chinas dibur, and the kelim of malchus is dibur. So that connects it all. That's why malchus is misper mitzad the kelim. Now comes a parenthesis, which is I think it's rather a long one. Yeah. Goes all the way till close to 7 lines from the bottom.
Top of the next page.
No.
7 lines from the bottom.
It's the second parentheses.
There is a second. You're right.
I think the whole at the top of the next page from somewhere.
How far up?
Yeah, right. The first word.
Oh, okay. You're right. You're right. And this parenthesis is somewhat takes it away to another level. Okay, so let's just stop here and just sum this up so we got it clear. I don't know. Does anyone know what the omnum is? So sometimes omnum could be used in Hebrew not as a qualification, but also like an additional point. Omnum doesn't always mean stira. So maybe he just means omnum, as in like, okay, this is the askol of it. Omnum, aber in avodah. Not really an abad as a qualification. That's probably what I would have to say. But generally, omnum does mean somewhat of a little different. But what's the kvetch here that's different? It's not really. He didn't say anything. No, the parentheses is not about that. That's the thing. I know the parentheses. The parentheses is going back to explain, if you remember, Nigiyas HaKelim. How does Mispar get into Eres? Remember, we spoke right. The Mispar, the volume part. Because at the end of the day, Keyecha Einsef, Elokus has Keyecha Gvul. That's just Sefirah. Eid reveals that. We said Gilei Helam. But there's also an element in Eidos that is 10. It's still 10. It's not just a revelation of the quality of God's power of Gvul. There is a number 10. So if you remember the last chapter, he said that it comes inside Negiyas HaKelim. So the Kelim do bring it out, even though the Eid has it. But like let's say in the Hashpah when Shmai Vavtanya speak. So in Machshava you don't see the details of Dibur. It doesn't mean there's no details there. When Dibur speaks, you're revealing that which was concealed in Machshava, in thought. So it's not a new Chiddush. So here, this parenthesis is going to discuss exactly and understand how the so-called, it's where quantity meets quality, basically. Because even in the mashal, when the guy is counting, good if he's appreciating the quality, but he's counting 100,000, he's not counting 1 or 2. In other words, there is an element of number there. See, that's where the mashal gets complicated. Like when let's say you use just the example, Kodesh Kadoshim, like the head of the body, is the smallest keli. It's the smallest section of the Beis HaMikdash, but it's the holiest. The intensity there is enormous. Okay, how would you measure it? By quality. You can't measure it by quantity because what are you going to measure? I mean, you can measure and yet in the example he uses the number 100,000. You're counting 100,000 and you're appreciating the quality. I guess what he's trying to say is that even in quality also has a number, so to speak. Except the number is a different type of number. It's like, like I think in science,
It is called mispar.
like when you measure, huh?
You're saying mispar. Still you're saying, even if you talk about quality.
Like for example, I'll give you an example. You're counting, let's say, 100,000 pieces of 100,000 stones and 100,000 diamonds. That would be the example. So they're both 100,000, but 100,000 diamonds is far more valuable than 100,000 stones. Okay, yeah, there's probably more examples like that. Appreciation of quality in a world of quantity. Okay, didn't spell it all out. We'll see where it goes. So, but to sum up, Omnam in Aveda.
Make an essay about that. Appreciation of quality in a world of quantity.
Yeah. Those that know the price of everything and the value of nothing. Then there are people who know the value of everything and the price of nothing. When they go shopping, it's dangerous. It's like. So the Omnam and Aveda. Anyone has any comment what the Omnam is? Or you think is what I'm saying? It's just it's interesting Omnam. Okay. The bottom line, Aveda, what is it even added for? What's the negayed of the Aveda? How does it even help us?
I think in a way he's saying that
because it's the same thing. I mean, the Aveda is that. So let's spell out the Aveda again. The Los man of Kalim is malchus. Okay, fine. That's biyah. Shem is biyah. And the Los man of Eres is mesirat nefesh. Why is it even a gay here? What does Halos have to do with number?
because mesirat nefesh in the guf reaches higher.
No, fine. I'm fine with that. But why is that negay here? He's not talking about higher or lower. Let me just read something again. put on the air conditioner? Or the heat?
Air conditioner.
Oh. No, it's fine, I'm just wondering. It's fine, it's alright. I have to read again why he's bringing this avodah, but clearly there's something he's adding here. It's not adding havana. If you take out the avodah, so what? It's saying malchus, machshavas and atzilas, dibros and malchus. Kelim are more in malchus than they are there. And here there's more eris. I'm going to look it up in Yom Tov Rosh Hashanah. Maybe there's something there. There must be some connection. Anyway, let's read the parentheses now. Ukamoi. Vihine, rather, I'm sorry. So now parentheses. Vihine. Bechinas misper eris ugam kemetzad negias hakelim kanal. The number in eris, which we said was quality, is like we mentioned before, it comes from negias hakelim. Meaning, it's because the kelim are already having an impact on the air, on the energy, is what's bringing out its number. So in other words, it's not just pure quality, where you have, like as I said, Sefirah God wants to have a defined structure, and the Eris of Atzilus reveal that. That's true. But the number that we're talking about, the number part, it results from the Eris meeting the kelim, where quality meets quantity, essentially. So he's going to explain this now. The Lamaila Mekelim Ein Sham Misper. Because the Eidas that are higher than Kelim, there's no number there. You can't talk about a number. Yeah, we say 10 hidden spheres, but that's only a shem amushal. That's only for us to be able to express it. You're not going to see 10 distinct spheres there.
Yeah, but still, the shem amushal has to do with Keach HaGvul.
But Keach HaGvul there is completely nichlal in Keach HaBligvul. So there's no way to talk about it. There's no distinction. Look, of course, in Mushlish and Atzmus Misper is there also, but you can't. There's no way to.
That's what he's trying to tell us now.
Absolutely.
Misper has to do
with yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, all the way up not, because all the way up there's no kelim.
Yeah, but all the way up, even though the fact that you mention it, you say sefiros are losing, but you say sefiros.
Okay, so 1 second. But why do you need to have a tzimtzum? Because their Keach HaGvul is one with the Keach HaBligvul. And it's, remember, for our avodah to reconnect to the Eibishter, we need to know that within the source, there's a root for the Eris, the Gvul of our world. But you can't go there without that Tzilis, because then you basically, what do you need the whole Tzimtzum and all the Shnalshalos for?
For us to be able to go there.
Exactly. But because if you go on your own there, right now, you're not going to relate, finite will not be able to last there. It will disappear. It'll be burned up, basically. Okay, so for all practical purposes, that's what means that there what dominates is Eir HaEin Sof. Look, it says in Eitz Chaim, Eir HaEin Sof Mamala Kol HaMetzias Ve'ein Sham Mokum Le'elamis. That's the bottom line. So what you need to have is two things. That we have a root for Gvul and Keach HaGvul, fine, but now we need to reveal it. So we need to get the water move away and let the objects arise, so to speak. So the Tzimtzum conceals everything. And then comes a kav, which is still very intense energy, that has within it, like you said, nekudas, but they're very pshutim. They're very substanceless. It's there, hidden. The kav gets diminished, akudim, and then natzilas, the eris. And I tell you, the eris are still too powerful, they break the containers. Then comes a point where Eir and Keli can meet. That's natzilas. So he's saying, so this part is already, so what gives Eir so-called its stability? That Eir HaChesed caressed in Keli HaChesed, that's mitzad negias HaKelim. Obviously everything is with Koyach of Eliki. But we're talking about now in the logical process of it. Let's talk the teacher. The teacher has a brilliant amount of ideas. He has to conceal them. And as he speaks to the student, now there's a conversation. As the student speaks to the student, Lefi the Kelim of the student, his Eiris get measured. And the Eiris have a place now to manifest. Remember, we need the Teyubara. We need to have a structure here. The structure of existence is determined by Kelim, not by Eiris. Even though Eiris are the so-called what's Eiris? What's the word for it? The artist's pen. What is that called? Not the past. What does the artist use? The feather. The quill. Not really the quill. What does the artist use? Okay. The point I'm making here is that here he's talking about the misper part. Misper as in distinction of 10 spheres. We're not talking about the 8 is going to end up there. Remember, let's talk interface here. I'm going to speak in a real avodah here, okay? We know that Torah mitzvahs comes down in shiurim, mugbolim. Right? There's a shir. And a mitzvah is not, you're not mekayim a mitzvah, certain mitzvahs, if you don't fulfill the shir of that mitzvah. Whether it's a shir of how much to eat or drink.
Easel.
Yeah, easel. No, the easel is the... Yeah. There's the canvas, there's the easel. Okay. So you have like this. So when we do a mitzvah with a certain shiurim, let's say eating matzah, a certain amount of matzah, with 18 minutes, this is all gvul, right? You're taking physical objects of this world that are also defined by gvul. And you're doing a mitzvah with it. What's going on? What's going on is you're revealing in a finite, defined world something that is divine. Now you could argue you're only revealing the divine gvul. But obviously we know that we're also revealing the Ratzon Elyon, all the way up. The question is, philosophically, when these two meet, can they really coexist? Because you could say, you know what, once you bring too much Elikus in, the gvul of the existence will cease to be.
That's the unknown.
So the answer is no. Absolutely you can bring the two, but it has to be done gradually. Just like a child growing, you can't suddenly pour into a child Kol HaTeira Kula, Ayin Beis, so the whole idea is like this, that we begin our lives where kelim are dominant, the physical world and all its structure. Within it, hidden is the eir. When we do mitzvahs and we start becoming conscious and aware of the divine, of the transcendent, we begin to reveal. First slowly, then more and more. As the kelim expand and get mature, they're able to receive more eris. So far, so good. It's like the mind's. So the question really, at the end of the day, is in the interface, what happens when it starts really growing? Okay, in the beginning we can understand. You're giving it, spoon feeding it. But once it starts getting more air, and the air becomes more powerful, how does it work? The answer it works is because a few things are happening here. First of all, the gvul itself comes from Elikus. It's just concealed. You only see, on this earth, you see volume, you see quantity. But within that quantity, why is there such quantity? Because God wanted there to be a world of multiplicity. He didn't just want Achdus, meaning Achdus in the sense of one entity. He wanted 7 billion people, Ein Day Saying Shavis, and wanted them to communicate with each other and get along.
And to find.
Right, exactly. So there's two things going on here. There's like in the body. 75 trillion cells, they all have their function, but there's one unifying force. Now we have free will, that's the thing. So we could also fight with each other. But let's speak, we align each other. Okay, as we align each other, the Eris and Kelim are coming closer. So the Eris are reminding us, don't forget it's all about God. The Kelim are reminding us God wants a structure. So when someone will say, you know what, Nafshi Chashka B'Teira, I don't want to be involved in the structure of the world, I want to go into the mountain. No. God wants, Keich HaGvul wants a world. He wants a structured world with details. You can't just say, I'm going to sit and learn Torah Kol Hayom Kol. That's not what He wants. He wants you to come down in a world of Gvul, and in Gvul, struggle with it and elevate it. On the other hand, the Eris remind you there's something higher. It's not just structure. There's Achdus. But there's a place where Eris and Kelim meet, so the Eir has to understand the language of the Kelim, and the Kelim has to understand the language of the Eir. That means Negiyas HaKelim. And that's where Misper becomes. So there's Misper Mitzad Kayach HaLukus. Yeah, the Eibishter creates Gvul and that's it. But He wants us to connect our understanding of Gvul with His understanding of Gvul. And they're not the same. That's why it comes into this whole Misper of Eris and Kelim. If you ask a simple person on this earth, what's Gvul? He'll tell you Gvul is absolute structure. The sun is not the moon. The day is not night. An animal is not a plant. It's absolute structure. If you ask Eris will say, one second, there's quality in all of this. They all speak to each other. There's a unity going on.
Chair talks to the table.
Right. And if you only speak from Eris, you're going to have a compromise of the structure. If you only speak to Kalim, you're going to have a compromise of the unity. Now this happens in Atzilus, not in Sefirah Agnuzis. Sefirah Agnuzis is the root that begins the process that God wants a structure, but it's not the structure yet. In Atzilus is where the structure is perfect. Eir and Kalim speak perfectly. In Biyah, the Eiris start getting diminished, and what you start having is emergence of Kalim, the dominance of Kalim. What dominates in our world? Aggression and quantity, or quality and sensitivity? For sure. What dominates in this world is power, is structures, who has more Kalim. Someone has more money, they can be the lowest lowlife of the world, and they can destroy someone that is the biggest tzaddik. There's nothing to do with even what's right and wrong. It's completely based on quantity, and it can be destructive. And I don't just mean generally; it's destructive to the point of destruction. If you go into Atzilus, there the measurement, there you value quality. Like we all know, you can't take your money with you. Money is a quantity thing. Up there, they only count receipts. What do they say? Not checks. So it's a whole different reality, what we value. The avodah is, in a world of quantity, can we learn to appreciate quality, and not just appreciate and realize that the world is just a keli for the quality of elikus. I'll put it in different words. Who serves whom? Does the body lead the soul, or does the soul lead the body? The fact of the matter is, the body leads the soul for most of us. You're hungry, this. You have a desire, a taiva, this. Mizman l'zman, you have an awakening from your soul, and it has something to say to you, and either you follow or you don't follow. But what controls our lives? Our kalim control our lives, 100%. The nefesh abamis, like he says here, kalim. Kalim control a person's life, 100%. A person has that moyach shalt al alev, like it says, Avram had control over his avodim. This is a major level to reach, a place where your body is just a merkava for your neshama. So who controls? Is it the hammer tells the hand what to do, or the hand tells the hammer what to do? I know it sounds ridiculous, but in our case, our hammers are telling our hands what to do. The way it's supposed to be is the other way around. So this is Eidos and Kalim spelled out in our lives. Now, the Eid is not meant to destroy the Keli, it's meant to tell the Keli, you're a hammer, I'm the hand, I'll tell you what to do, not you tell me what to do. On the other hand, the hammer gives structure to the hand because you can't do anything with your hand. You can't knock in a nail with your hand. In other words, a neshama can't do a mitzvah, begash miselim, without the body. But the body doesn't have direction without the neshama. I mean, I'm just spelling it out on basic level by us. That's what it comes down to. So, exactly, Negiyas HaKelim, and how Mispur comes into play here. So Mispur is really, that's why I prefaced, I say it again. Mispur has two elements. There's Mispur as God's power to create Mispur. There's God's power to create Bli Mispur. Bli Gvul. That's the power. Now comes the process. How does this emerge? So there's a tzimtzum that conceals the Bli Mispur. The Mispur slowly emerges. First, the numbers are very vague. Remember we said Nekud the Kav Shetach. Machshava, think of it, Machshava Dibur Maisa. First it's in a visible place. Then it becomes more emerges. As you conceal the Eidos, the Kalim become more powerful. In Teyu there's imbalance. In Tikkun, they meet. What's going on here? That the Kalim are offering structure, and the Eidos are offering direction, if you want to put it that way. If you remember, we spoke about the examples that the king has different shluchim. The Eid is a shliach of Elyon. It's basically, its role is to tell us what God wants. The Kalim is what God wants. He wants the structure. The tachteinim, so to speak.
What God wants, one implements it? Maybe.
Yeah, both, and implements, and also reveals the mile of the Kalim too. Let's not forget that. It's like Teda reveals the mile of Tshuva. Eir also reveals, not only reveals, it creates the Kalim. It carries the Keich HaReshima, the Keich HaGvul, to create Kalim. It also is carried through Eir. But at the end of the day, they come to a point where, look in our world, quantity and quality are not the same. In Atzilus, quantity and quality are of meat. That's the goal. That's why we're learning about it. So right now, so that's what he's saying. So that's what we're coming down to. So when we talk about Mispur, remember the whole point of all the chapters. Remember he kept on saying how not only Kalim have 10 Sefiros, also Eidos have 10 Sefiros. But in Eid it's pshutim, it's substance, it's shapeless. And then as Eid gets, the containers, the shapeless, the energy is shapeless and bligvul. But the shadish, I mean, how many times have we learned this point? The Eidos already have something in them. I go back to Shmai Vavtayin. They're conveying an idea. In that idea, there's Chesed and Gvura, but until it hits the Kalim of Shammai And Hillel and Shammai, it doesn't manifest.
No tree, it's still a seed.
A seed, exactly. The different ways to explain it. But the point is, and then they meet. So now when they meet, what are numbers? So number signifies, you keep saying, the Pardes says gvul. Number means gvul. Number means 1, 2, 3, 4. But there's a difference. You see here, he's showing how in the gvul of numbers, you can also have quality. And the other way around. In the quality of numbers of Eris, something manifests also in the containers. Because when I tell you the number, it's not like you have my number. It's the same 100,000, except you.
It's yours.
Yeah. So it's the mitzias of my malchus. But the point is, it's not like cheshech. We're not talking about your number is 10,000 and my number is 100,000. So it's the same reality. It's like when we say that chesed and gvura on this earth is mayim and eish. So yes, mayim and eish don't look like chesed and gvura, but they're not chesed and gvura. It's just hidden. So it's in other words, it's concealed energy basically. So even the kelim at the end of the day is also getting the energy from the eris, the number. But now the number dominates, which is the focus is on the details, like in dibur. A person who's speaking, he's not saying a shikr, or someone who's speaking not what he's thinking. In dibur, the details are details that originate from the mind. It's not a dibur, that's a dibur that follows machshava. So a person has an idea, now he's communicating it. The communication, the kelim are dominating, but they're still reflecting the idea that's in the brain, in the mind. However, in the mind, it's more focused on the quality of the energy, the eir, mispera eiris. In speaking, the focus is on mispera kelim to the point that someone listening can misunderstand maybe. But that doesn't mean that the dibur doesn't have in it all the machshava. So the point here is that there's all examples of how a reality goes through changes to the point where it can become completely hidden, but it's still all there. And the question is, how do we retrace the steps? That's the bottom line. Okay. So now goes the hine. That's why I elaborated. No, but you could say, what do you mean mitzad negiyas hakelim? No, mitzad eris is mitzad keich hagvul of elikus. No, because he's talking here about mitzad eris as in tangible number 10. In other words, I just want to add one thing for my own clarification. Notice, if you go to Sefirah Agnuzis, there you don't say misprit of Sefirah is mitzad negiyas hakelim because there's no kelim there. There you say Sefirah because keich ain't saved. The Eibishter has the power of keich hagvul. However, you could argue that Bedaka is there too. No, maybe not. There you could say it's completely mitzad l'mayla, but it's not. Then it's not in a structured existence. Even though, if I recall, we spoke about this a bit, because there's no kelim in Sefirah Agnuzis, but the part that says there's a sheresh kelim, that the shimu affects the kav, but that's after the tzimtzum. Because there, if you remember, he said shir atzmi b'keach, the keach hagvul is really, the keach habligvul is being mishayer, the infinite possibilities are allocating a gvul, so it's completely mitzad keach habligvul there.
But even or, you can say the same thing about or.
No, that's true, correct. No, I just want to say, there's no negiyas hakelim. There it's completely mitzad keich habligvul wants that.
There is negiyas, because it's malchus then said, it's already...
But that's after. I'm talking about when the shir, when the bligvul says shir atzmi b'keich keich hagvul.
It's the lowest level of air.
No, my point. No, because I'll tell you what the point is. Because there the focus is on what God wants, not on the building of the structure. Here we're talking about the building of the structure comes to be. What God wants, He wants gvul, He wants bligvul, He wants a lot of things. Okay, no, I'm just clarifying for my own self. It's clearly speaking that's Sefirah Atzilus here, not there. So mitzad negiyas hakelim, like you said at the end of last chapter, right? Yeah, because mispar is at the end of the day gvul. I just want to see the language of the pardes again. 1 second. Not necessarily. Things in these psukim here are pretty not so common. I looked around, especially the detail here. This is pretty big chidushim. Yeah, there we go. If you read the pardes on top of page Kufnun Tes, so he says again, Mispir is mebalei gvul, v'afal pi she'enim balei gvul, be'erech shorsh maposhet balei gvul. So in other words, misper. Okay, it's clear that there's the part of misper. Okay, so he's talking on the Giyas HaKelim, fine, the process. So here's what he says. The Lamayla Mekalim Ein Sham Misper. Because higher than Kelim, there's no number. We have to understand the inyan of this, what this means exactly. So he's explained. Now there's inner containers and outer container. Or better put, the inner dimension of containers and outer dimension of containers.
Same containers, wouldn't it be better to use receptacles? No?
If it helps you, I mean with containers and receptacles.
More cashmere's.
And receptacles? Depends for whom.
Anything that can be said, okay.
I honestly, it's really what works. I'm not opposed to receptacles. I like containers better, for me. Because also contain has another word besides being physical. It contains something. It explains what it does. Receptacle is also a legitimate word. The primis hakelim agam shein gam ken b'chinas kelim upoelim ba'er. The inner container. So basically, primis hakelim b'chinas hakelim physically is if you have a cup. Let me give you a cup. I'll make a demonstration. So primis hakelim, of course, is this part, and chetzenis hakelim is this part, which in our case would be this contains the liquid. This we hold on to and we can drink. Even though, of course, you could say this is the inner of that. Okay. But primis hakelim, chetzenis hakelim is like this. So it goes like this. So even though primis hakelim, even though they're also kelim and they affect the air, nevertheless, nevertheless, they're not so defined. And the revelation is really from the energy, not from the kelim. We could say this is shem etzem. This is elaborated much later at the end of this volume. The shem etzem, because let's talk about shemis. There's different shemis, right? There's shem etzem. No. There's go shem etzem, shem teir, shem pu'ula, shem hamushal. 4 types. Shem etzem is when you describe the actual thing. Let's say shemesh is a shem etzem. If you say mo'ir, it's already a shem ha teir or pu'ula. Teir and pu'ula are similar. Teir really means description of the thing. Pu'ula means its function. So you could find 2 ways. You could say, let's say, I'm thinking, I don't have an example on my tip of my tongue. If you have an example of all 4, then Shem HaMushal is like a nickname, a kinui. It's Shem HaKinui, Shem HaMushal. So say Avram is a Shem HaEtzem, Isha Chesed is a Shem HaTeir or Shem HaPu'ula, and Shem HaMushal would be Eisen HaGodl, or other things that are used on Avram. Meaning it's like an example, or there it could also be somewhat Shem HaPu'ula. But bottom line is, Shem HaEtzem is the closest. I don't know if he's going to say this, but this is similar to what he said before. If you remember, he said the Kelim in Atzilus, higher than Malchus, is like Eir, Gvanei Ha'ar, the colors. Maybe the Gvanei Ha'ar sometimes is called the Primis HaKelim. We'll see if he compares the 2. But bottom line is, what the Rebbe Rashab is now, you see, he's trying to understand well how Kelim and Eris meet, especially in context of Misper. So remember, all about interface. So he's introducing now a new level called Primis HaKeli. Then you see how the interface works? First, it's Eris, then Kelim. They meet in Atzilus. Then there's the Primis HaKeli that becomes the interface between the Chetzenis HaKeli and the Eir. That's essentially where he's going with this. So now, Primis HaKeli is not Hagbol. It's primarily Galus comes from there. V'yesh lem shu Shem Etzem shu is Galus Etzem kamei shehu. So Shem Etzem is a shem. It's a keli. It's not the thing itself. It's a name of it. You're describing, but it's the revelation of the Etzem the way it is. Like when you say, for example, Anochi Hashem Elikacha. Anochi is le'esam is le'bishum. Anochi is the closest description of Atzmus. Ata and who. Elokim and Havaya, God forbid, are not outside of Elokus. But there you're already describing Al Shem, like it says in Medrash. Al Shem Maisi Kachanik Nikra. That when he's doing chesed, came Kale. When he's going to war, Shem Tzvokis. Gvura, Elokim. So all they're all names, they're all Shem Nemchokim, they're all names you're not allowed to erase, and they're holy and so on. But they're describing a distinct and specific Pa'ula. King called Shem Etzem. You want to know Atzmus? Eya, like he says to Moshe. I mean, it's also not Atzmus Mamish, but you're talking, you want to know the personality of the Eibishter is built in Metzias Nimtza. You want to describe the Eibishter in a certain manifestation, then you have different terms. So that's a Shem Etzem. So it's also a Keli, it's also a name. Even Eya She'eya is a name. Ato is a name. Anoichi. Even Havai is sometimes Shem Etzem compared to Elokim. He said before Elokim was Kelim actually, right? So Shem Etzem. So here it goes now, ladies. The Vada Yesh B'zeh Gam Kim B'Pu'ulas HaKelim. Surely it has within it also from the functions of a Keli, because it's Pnimis HaKeli. Achzeu P'chinis Pnimis HaKelim. However, this is the level of inner dimension of the Kelim. Sheizgal Simakom Mokim Imakom Mokim Ha'er Kamei Shehu. In other words, it's still a Keli, it's revealing, but the primary revelation is coming from the Eir. And the Keli is just, we'll call it like a clay yad, a clay kibble. It's just there to have something to express. Like when we say that, what's the lashon there? We says in Eitz Chaim many times that you can't express it. Eina peh yochel, but you have to have some word for it. Yeah, Hasha'ezin lo yochel is. So you have to have a word for it. Like the Rebbe once wrote, I remember in order, he wrote Yud Aleph and Yud. Sefirah is Gvul. Yud Aleph symbolizes Bli Gvul. I remember wrote, you're talking about Yud Aleph, and he wrote, what means symbolizes Bli Gvul? It means we have no other way to say, so we say Yud Aleph. Meaning it's not Yud. But it's not really 11 and not 12. So it's, in other words, it's a name, but it's a name that's describing primarily the level. It's focused on. See, here we have another, he's splitting the hair here. So now you have Mispir, it's a number, but it's a number that's reflecting something that's beyond. It's not focused on the quantity, it's focused on expressing the qualities. That's Primus HaKelim. So there we're going to see how Negiah, that's how air gets Mispir. I mean, there's a lot of examples are needed here to really understand this, but these are the issues here, yeah. If you read it on your own, it becomes like, completely technical. What is, the Vadi Yesh B'zeh Gam Kim Pulus HaKelim, Achzeh Primus HaKelim, Sheizgal Sim Kol Mokem Ha'er Kamei Shehu. Okay. Well, the common Perek Kufnun Ches. Kufnun Ches. Ches. Those that need reading glasses, this is your time. Ches. Positive. Maybe it's a mistake, but it says here Ches. So Perek 158. What is he going to say? Yizboer the shem ha'etzem hu l'mayla gam b'chinas primus hakelim. So later he says the shem ha'etzem is even higher than the inner dimension of containers. B'kol mokum yesh b'zeh negias hakli. Nevertheless, it still has the negias hakli. The keli touches it in some way. What does this mean? The shem etzem u'lemayla gam b'chinas negias hakli. Okay, the shem etzem is even higher than primus hakelim, but nevertheless, kelim affect that too. Okay, he's breaking it even further down. He said it's like shem etzem. Now he's saying that if you break it further, shem etzem is even higher than primus hakelim, but the negias hakli is still there. He does say it. Gvane and what the containers are the colors of the light. Zeo b'chinas primus hakelim. That's primus hakelim. Okay, so it is what he said before. Primus hakelim. Before he called out the kelim of the 10 spheres higher than malchus. Okay. The 9 spheres, sorry. And Ayin delve into what it says elsewhere in the 3 levels of name, Shem, Etzem, V'Ateir, V'Apula. The name of Etzem, there's something like it's the Teir, the description of the thing. and Pa'ula, its function. Yeah, it's very clear the difference. Yeah, so etzem is the thing, like you'll say.
Yeah, you can take a cup, take a becher, for example.
Yeah. ובחינס חיצייניס הכלים הוא שמגביל המארס ובוים על ידי זה בחינס מציאס דבר. So that's the inner dimension of kelim. He said a few things here. First of all, it is still a keli and functions as a keli, but it's primarily simply revealing the main revelations from the light, from the energy. Like shem etzem, or lower than shem etzem, but it's still affecting the shem etzem. Chitzeinis hakelim, on the other hand, they actually define, and they magbil ha'eres, they actually contain magbil, they shape the energies, uboyim al-yizeh b'chinas mitzias davar, and they come in being a mitzias davar. So, for example, taking the light has colors. So that's still primis hakelim. But if the light is, let's say, contained, the light is contained and brought into, I'm thinking how, let's say, it has some effect on us, let's say solar energy is bottled.
No, but is this the colored glass? Is this the mushroom?
No, that's not a good mushroom. No, not actually, the opposite. Here the light actually has colors, the prism.
Yeah, prism.
Yeah. Anyway, but here's Magbil and Mizexna Mitzias Davar. Now, Beis Madreges Elohim B'chol Esses Sefirah D'Atzilus. These two levels are in all the 10 spheres of Atzilus. Rakshem Madreges Shalamayla B'chinas HaMalchus. Only that in the levels higher than Malchus, Ha'ikru B'chinas Primis HaKelim. Because now he's reconciling with what he said before. Because right now, if you stop here, you say, 1 second, didn't he say before that the Gvane, the Kelim before Malchus, the 9 levels, there it's like the colors. And the main thing there is Eir. And then Malchus is where Kelim become the misper of Kelim. So he's saying the truth is B'chlolos, both inner and outer level of dimension of containers is in all of Atzilus. But if you break it down, primarily the Kelim that are higher than Malchus. And Malchus is obviously Valkain Mispera Meruba who b'chinas Mispera Eres, and that's why the Mispera Meruba is the Mispera of energies, the quality, right. Because in other words, the quality, Primis HaKelim. Okay. Another parenthesis now that goes a few lines. Moving Gamkein the b'chinas Mispera Eres ain't b'chinas is Chalkos Kolkach. And it's also understood that the number in the quality of energy is not so much in distinction and in revelation. Because it doesn't yet manifest that much. What? Islapshus, what do you say? Like we see in profound concepts, ideas. You don't see in them, recognize in them, distinguish in them the definitions and the distinctions. Because it's just right there that the intensity of the idea dominates. Like we learned before in the Maimer of Nosei. That's why I keep using this example. By Shammai v'Hillel. By Shammai Hillel. Shekiblu svara achas. They received, Shammai and Hillel heard one thought, one theory. And in their comprehension, it broke down into distinction. That is because the svara, the idea, is shapeless when it was flowing from the teacher, and that's why each of them were able to take a different level, because there the eir is still not in the form of ischalkus. You see, this is the key here. This is the key to the interface. Eir, it still has it within it, and it's not like Sefirah Agnuzis or the Kav. It's in Atzilus, but without the Kelim it doesn't. So the Primis HaKeli is just helping us understand how it really works and where they meet. Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't yet. It's still mitzad the pshitas of the Sefirah. Back to that. Like it says elsewhere in the name of Shem Etzem. That shem etzem, that's what, when it says Hashem, God gave Shlomo wisdom, that's the etzem ha-chochmah. That's shem etzem. He's just connecting it all now. The shem etzem that he just spoke about in Primis HaKelim, right? He's connecting it all here, that we're talking here all, this is still the second parenthesis, but it's talking that Mispar Eidus here is still in a state of pshittus, relatively. The benefesh, what is this in nefesh? Who is galos hamuskolah sheme'etzem keichach moseh. When the Eibishter gave Shlomo Chachma, what did he give him? He gave him ideas? He gave him theories? No. He gave him the power to conceive of ideas. Etzem ha-chochma. That's shem etzem. So when you give someone an idea itself is already an expression. It's not the shem etzem. It's not the etzem. It's already an expression. When you give someone the power, benefesh is galos hamuskolah sheme'etzem keichach moseh. Shabo b'bchinas hafshata legamri comes in a complete state of abstraction. Oi bisalmas b'levush ein berach klal, or concealed in a garment that's completely, infinitely distant from comprehension. Kumay mishle shlema, like the examples of shlema. So both extremes. Either it's an abstract thing that's completely beyond comprehension, or when it comes into comprehension, you put it into a mashal. The mashal seems very simple. But in that mashal is concealed very profound wisdom. We're giving an example here is basically for in nefesh of the idea of Eidus as they are before Kelim affect them.
That's Mispar Meruba.
It's the Mispar Meruba. But he's saying that Mispar is also not distinction, it's more intensity. It's not really revealed yet. Or Mispar Hamuat, after the parentheses, Mispar Hamuat, what's Mispar Hamuat? Which level is that? No, he's still talking here higher than malchus. Malchus comes the next line. Hold on a second. But what's Mispar Hamuat? The Kail? The Klal before the Prat? No. Mispar Hamuat, he means... that the Muad b'tzad the Kalim, that there's the Miyut HaKalim. Yeah. Like Machshava, like what he said, that in Eidus, the higher the number there. Kalim, however, higher you go or less. That's what he means in Mispar Hamuat.
Maybe he means when it says here this line, they don't conceal. He's talking about that. They don't conceal. It's Kalim.
Well, where?
Third line from the top.
Which top?
This top. The top.
One second, let me just know, because he's not talking to malchus now. But he's not talking malchus. The malchus is next line. He's talking now higher than malchus. That's
right.
But no, but there he's talking about malchus in the prince miyut ha'er, and prince that's when the pill. One second. Here's Gamkin Mispar Meruba from prince katnus. Did we skip that line? Huh? No. Mispar Meruba katnus is when the lower person who got the number is counting it. Yeah, but it's in the state of katnus. No, he's not saying, he's not talking about malchus here.
No, it's not malchus here. It's not malchus. In the air. Remember?
In the air, the counting is not katnus, it's godless.
Mispar Kelim then is katnus.
Mispar Kelim is katnus, but there's not counting Mispar Kelim. 1 second. Yeah, that's not connected to this. No, Mispar Hamuat here means the Kalim. In other words, the focus is not on the quantity. That's really basically what he's saying. Mispar Hamuat. In other words, before malchus, the 9 spheres higher than malchus also have Kalim. They have primis hakelim, chetzenis hakelim. So what's going on number-wise? We said the number-wise there, the focus is on Mispar Eidus, right? On quality. He now explained in the parentheses, what does Mispar mean? It's Misad Negiyas HaKelim. Negi is primis hakelim. So primis hakelim give that type of element of a number there, even though there's still the focus is completely on quality. But there's also chitzenis kelim in Chachma and Bina and in Chesed Gvura. So chitzenis kelim there is b'miyut.
But what about the counting?
What content?
The Indian of counting, the Indian of Mr. Meruba, Mr. Moore.
The word, he doesn't use the misper muad before. Before he used the word misper meruba and misper akel. So he's not here. He's used here muad. He means muad akel. That's why I don't think he means miut here, because it doesn't. It's completely not consistent. Because there the klal was kedem aprat. So it can't be that he means that here. Misper muad he means misper akelim. No, but this chitzenis akelim also. He's answering a question. Is there chitzenis akelim in Chesed? Or only primis hakelim? We know there's also chitzenis. If there's chitzenis hakelim, so that too is misper, should be a misper. That too should have an effect. But there, the dominant force is eir. So the main thing is misper eir, quality. Misper hakelim is b'miyut. Where do misper hakelim become beribui? Now comes the next level, the second half. Then he goes on. He said, "Is that silas?" They're bechinis miyut. Why? Because the higher you go, kelim are less diminished. It's like machshava. You have less kelim. That's chitzenis hakelim. I'll explain it. Basically,
You understand it, right? If you start right before the parentheses, like 2 lines before the parentheses.
exactly, that's the second half. Exactly what I'm saying. He's talking here about the eris. He says like this: Beis madregas and b'chales sefiros. Madregas shalamaylam b'chinas malchus the ikar is primis hakelim, and that's why mispar meruba b'chinas mispar eris. He's answering the question. In other words, where does mispar get into eir? It comes from the primis hakelim. Kelim have some type of element that reveal the number. However, the dominant force there is the quality, not the quantity. The second parenthesis, he explains it even further, that you can't say that this mispar is really his malchus. And Mispar Hamuad, there, the Chetzenis HaKelim are not dominant in the 9 spheres.
So what used to tell me? Keil
No. Mispar Hamuad has nothing to do with Keil and Merubah. No. I don't see how, it won't fit in, it doesn't work. Because the guy he's counting the 100,000. So where's there Mispar Hamuad? The Mispar Hamuad would be basically Mispar Hamuad is the Kelim. He says clearly, Kelim are diminished as you at the higher levels of Tzilas. Yeah. Ub'chinas malchus is the opposite. Ha'ikar ub'chinas chitzenis hakelim. In the malchus, the primary force is the outer containers. Ub'chinas primis hakelim shebezeu is galos eir ub'chinas miyut. What he's adding in this whole parenthesis is basically, as I said, adding a level. Till now, we're talking eir pitched against keli. So mispar eris is quality, mispar kelim is quantity. So the higher you go, kelim are less, eris are more. The lower you go, kelim are more, eris are less. And the distinction is malchus and the 10 highest. Now he added primis hakeli. Notice he said lahavana Ayin Beis. Primis hakeli makes it a little easier to relate where mispar meets. So primis hakeli is mispar, but it's completely subjugated to eir. So what you say now is not just the eir is more, that also primis hakelim. That's what we're talking about. Is in the higher levels is more, and chitzenis hakelim, which is dominant ikar b'chinas primis hakelim. Shebezeu is galos eir b'chinas miyut. So malchus, not only the eir is miyut, it's also primis hakelim are miyut. That's the chidush here. It's also less. And what is more? Chitzenis hakelim. What it means in basically what it's adding in Havana here, it's not just words. It's, as I said, it's the interface where mispar meets beyond mispar. Eir ultimately is definitely is an agent of the divine. In this case, it's carrying the divine Kayach HaGvul. Fine. But as far as structure goes, it's Kelim that creates structure. So the Primis HaKeli is giving you, like I said, there's so to speak, it's almost like the Keli Sheba'er. That there's some place where they meet. So that's the Primis HaKeli is adding here. It's Havana in understanding. Like the colors of the light. Colors of the light. So the colors of the light, they're Kelim by definition, but their function is very much an air function. Yeah, basically. Like shem etzem. Okay. Ubaveda, back to the Aveda. Maybe this will help. We're still in the parentheses, by the way. Ubaveda. Who are hefresh bein neshamas the Atzilus and neshamas the biyah. This is the difference between the souls of Atzilus, souls of biyah. The neshamas that, like you said before, neshamas of biyah, that's kelim.
This will help us understand.
Yeah. The neshamas that Atzilus ha'ikaru avodah shemitzad nefesh alkis limsa nafshe be'echad b'chinas bittul b'mitzias. You see from this, you could see that this was written in stages, because it's like not suddenly now he's adding this in the parentheses. Okay, so naved mitzad nefesh alkis nefesh is bittul b'mitzias. I'm sorry, the shamas of Atzilus, the primary avodah is nefesh alkis, the divine, to give your life with echad in the oneness of God. Bittul mitzias. When shamas the biyah ikra avodah shemitzad nefesh habamis, and the primary work in the souls of biyah is from the animal soul. The hainu masha nefesh alkis eved avedasi levada l'saken nefesh habamis, which means how the nefesh alkis, the divine soul, works to refine and to repair the animal soul. B'chinas bittul hayesh, in refining, in sublimating its yeshus. How this helps, I'm not sure, but let me just think a second. It just again says that these two levels. It's these two levels. Fine, listen, avodah always helps because it's negated avodah. Now we know what to do today. But practically, so now basically, this may be the omnam. I'm thinking out loud here. The omnam may be, but those that really know chassidus know that nefesh alkis nefesh habamis is primis akelim chetzenis akelim. Maybe that's the omnam, because the omnam is, we're talking eir and keli, but in aveda it's really primis akelim chetzenis akelim, and that he explained now. The but would be, he didn't spell it out, but the but would be, we just said eir and keli is mispir eris and mispir akelim, but naveda, he doesn't say it, but naveda, that's primis akelim chetzenis akelim. Maybe that's why the parenthesis comes. I have to look up the sources. Let's not go there. Okay, Valpi Hanal Yuvan, according to the above, we'll understand. Mashakasav Hayi mispir bnei Yisrael asher lo yisafir. Is this symbolic? And I believe we'll understand. Okay, so this ends this subject. This is a complicated piece here, but it adds the whole matching where they meet. And it's insistent. He wants to have that Kalim impose the mispir on Eir. That's clear. That's very clear. So it's primis Kalim. Now, according to the above, we'll understand which is like a contradiction. I think we learned this in Pabolok, the end of the Maimer. That the number of Eden, Bnei Yisrael, children of Israel, is Ashal Yisrael, is something you cannot count. What does it mean, a number you can't count? Is it a number, or can't you count it? So here he brings, this is really where it comes together, where they meet. Number meets no number, beyond number. According to the above, it's understood. This is the meaning of the mispira eris, the number of energies. Even though they too have a number, nevertheless, it's in a state of not being lo yisafir, uncountable, unmeasurable. Because it's not in any defined and distinct way, literally, mamish. It's somewhat, but not mamish. Now he's using these words that came from the parentheses. Okay. Okay. Yeah. But you see what he's saying now? You see what's going on here? He's using primis akelim, which was something he just used in the parentheses. Now he's using it in the pnim. So this is primis akelim, primis aer she'enim b'chinas chalkus adayin. This is the level of the inner dimension of the containers and the inner dimension of the energy that are not yet distinguishable. They're not yet distinct. The visible. Like we say, to his understanding, God's understanding, ein mispir. There's no count, there's no measure, there's no limit, basically. The mamashakasav ein mispir, from saying that there's no count, moving shashayach sham mispir, is moving that it's possible that there is a number there. However, the number is one that has no countable. Because when you say ein lo yisafir, if something that's completely not together, you don't say you can't count it. So what does this mean? Because tfuna, which is like tfuna bina, is is the internal and core intelligence higher than the intelligence that's in emotions. Like he says in the Siddur on this pasuk in Tfunos Ayin Misper. And there in the Siddur clearly, the primary thing is the air shebemechen. There the primary force is the energy, because mechen is called chayu. Energy. That's why it's in the state of Ayin Misper. Okay. So what he's adding here now is another element to this whole picture which needs definitely explanation. So when we count quality, is it counting or not counting? That's the question. Because you could make the argument, counting is in the world of quantity, not in the world of quality. Like I made the case before. Someone will come to you and put down $1 million, a bribe, that you should compromise yourself, halacha. So it's a lot of money, but it has no quality to it that you're not going to compromise your value. Someone else comes with a penny and gives it to you as a gift with sincerity, it's worth a lot more to you. Just using examples. So you can make the argument that quantity actually is not necessarily a contradiction to quality, but it's definitely not the same world. When you're doing counting, counting means nothing, basically. You can make the argument that counting means nothing. When in the scheme of real things. Who cares? You're bringing me all your money, you're coming in Elam Haba, there's no money, it has no value. All your quantity means nothing. I don't care. Everything you accumulated. I'm not talking now in Kedusha that Kamas is Zechus and so on. I'm just talking...
Martha Baspices, when she went up, was hunger. She had all the gold and silver and meant nothing. Because
right, exactly. Yeah, exactly right. A perfect example. In other words, I'm just making an argument. You can make an argument that quantity is only valuable to superficial people, to a material world. Quality is the only thing. But there's a problem to say that. Why? Because Eibishter wanted a world of quantity. He created a world of quantity. I don't mean the quantity we accumulate. The world is a world of multitudes. How many? So clearly the quantity of the world, yes, we can be deceived and worship it to the point where we don't value quality. But it is a reality. So that's why we really want to come to a place where you want quantity to meet quality. You want the quantity of this world to appreciate quality. So basically, that's where Eris and Kalim meet, and that's in a sense like, so that's why we want to have the word mispid, because why do we have to even force the word mispid in Eris? Say Eris is quality, again, there's no numbers there. No numbers. Right. Because then you have Eris that are detached. This may also explain an unbelievable thing, because many times, for example, Chassidus has this question many times. You're talking about Eid Ein Sof, that's L'mayla Magbola, and you insist that it should be done through a mitzvah that's dafke gvul, and gvul that is not compromisable. Tefillin is a certain shape. You change the shape, the whole mitzvah is not possible. It passes the whole thing. In Karbonis, you do it a little differently. So you can ask the question, what's going on here? You're trying to bring yellow kuz that's higher than the whole Lo Yisofir, and here you're focusing on and it's dafke the gvul that brings the bli gvul. Like we spoke about Adon Eina Min Amidah. There's no way that it could be Eina Min Amidah if it wasn't first Amidah. Because you want to bring the two together. You don't want the escape into the world of bli gvul. Let's say, Yom Kippur, you go bli gvul, then you go to the world, now we're in the world of gvul. You want them to meet. I just saw a beautiful sikha from the Rabbi ask the question, if Simchas Torah is higher than all Hagbalas, and you dance without learning and you wrap it up, so why do we get an aliyah? Which is already reading it. Don't read it at all. So the Rebbe says, because then the Yetzer Hara will say, you know what, Simchas Torah turns to bli gvul. Now you're in my control. Now we're in the world. And the world is gvul. So you need to have even Simchas Torah, a shtikl mamutza. So you also do something that you appreciate the Torah, not just dancing. In other words, you need the gvul sheba bli gvul and the bli gvul sheba gvul. It's a Meidzik Sikha, very unbelievable Sikha. He speaks there about the Russian Jews. I told you. They say, I don't know who it is, it's a very powerful Sikha. Simchas Torah Chav Ches. Chav Zayin it is?
Yeah, but they say they know who
it is.
Yeah.
He denies it, but I guess anyone that really did that probably would deny it.
It's an unbelievable Sikha.
Yeah. Anyway, let's so bottom line is, so the answer is, because that's what he wants. So you can't that's why he wants mispid and Eris, because you want Eris to meet the Kalim. That's why he's focusing so much on that. There's misper, but it's a misper shelo yisafir. That's the thing. It's a number that's not countable in a certain sense. Because if you go back to the Moshel of the Alter Rebbe, you're counting 100,000 coins or 100,000 items. It's 100,000. So as you're counting the world's multitude, let's say a tzaddik, a Rebbe would be counting, Moshe Rabbeinu. He counted Eden, but what he saw was not numbers. He saw quality, but he had to count them. So you're counting them, and what you're appreciating is the quality of it, not the quantity. Then when you report the number to somebody who's on a lower level, by him, he's impressed with, what a big number it is. You know?
Well, we spoke about yesterday, if you have 9 people, if you have 10 brings a whole different quality to it. It's not only another one, it brings a whole level, another.
That's a good example. But the focus is not on the 10 so one person will say, wow, you have 10 people in the room, and he'll say, no, that 10th person brought a new quality. That's what you have in the room. Shkin Tasharia.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying, but someone who's more superficial could say, "Wow, you have a numbers game." No, if you have 1 million chassidim coming to see the Rebbe, someone say, "Wow, 1 million," they'll write an article about it. And by the Rebbe would be, it's not the millions, the kedusha that comes with the million.
Yeah.
The same number can reveal 2 different things. That's That's the point here. Are you focusing on the kelim or are you focusing on the eris? The point is, you have a place where misper meets, the 2 quality and quantity meet. It's clearly what he's saying here. Now he's adding this. That's the lo yisafir. So if you ask that person, it's like you ask the question. You ask that person, how many are there? He'll give you the number, but that's not the ikar by him. The ikar is the quality that he's appreciating in it. So we look at 10 sefiros. 10, a nice number, 10. But someone who understands what the 10 sefiros are, there's a 10. It's 10 energies. It's 10 divine powers.
Which is basically one.
Yeah. It's like when the Rebbe said he didn't get tired from counting diamonds. He saw diamonds. Another person would get tired because he's counting kelim. How long can you count? How long can you stand there? That's a good example, actually, because he's appreciating the eichus. So the chitzenius doesn't matter. It's not how much time. It's not important. It's paled by comparison to the quality that's coming out of it. I mean, that's how I would. I mean, it would be interesting to see how others would explain this whole piece. But this is,
you even say he's focusing on the mitzvah, even the dollar stuff.
Yeah, but
what it does.
Look, quantity and quality meet in Gedusha. Remember, in not Gedusha, they can be separated. Obviously, at the end of the day, we need both. I'm not arguing that it's... But the point is, the Eibishter wants the connection. That's why you have the Eina Min Amida in the Midah.
That's why you have misper lo yisafir.
Exactly.
You have the misper and you have the
What that means is, Eris and the Kelim, Pnimis HaKelim, make it even stronger. Because you have the Misper Pnimis HaKelim that's a Keli, but it's so connected to the Eir. So like if you say the Rebbe counting diamonds, but it's also Pnimis HaKelim. It's not just Eir.
Yeah.
It's also you. That's what it is. It's also your structure, but it's your Pnimis. The Pnimis of your Keli is connecting. It's not just the Eiris. Because you could say, okay, only he sees the Neshamas. Yeah. He doesn't see individuals. Yeah, like people say, did the Rebbe recognize me? Or it's just like, you recognize, Makiv Dikuwe. Yeah. That's it. That's how Pnimis HaKelim answers absolutely.
Is that deine individuality, dein Ziel?
No, you got the wrong guy. I have a soft spot for the Rebbe. The Rebbe me is Rebbe. There's a Rebbe Zanishkan. What do you want? What are you asking me? Why don't you ask me if he ask me if he's a Rebbe? If he's a Rebbe, yeah, I have no doubt that he did. If he's not a Rebbe, then what do you want? The only one,
No, but Begashmis, when you went by Kesher Bracha, like a Chazan,
but Begashmis, the way Chassidus explained, it depends how much the Rebbe manifested himself in that. I think he recognized, but I don't know if it was relevant that he had to. You're going to Yechidus. And you're speaking personally to the Rebbe, those things. The Rebbe then would obviously be more bislapshus. It's a question of bislapshus. That's all. The Rebbe said many times, we don't need Yechidus today because I'm being mamshechid by Fabrengen or by dollars. That's not a joke. It means that the Rebbe had to change, because of times or because of the number of people. But he said that he's doing it. So I guess there's different ways to be mamshech the inyanim. Obviously, from Das Tachton, it's nicer to stand with the Rebbe and just talk to him an hour about your problems. But clearly, that doesn't always work. Look, if you believe in brachas of the Rebbe, you have to believe in the way the Rebbe says the brachas, not on your terms, it's on his terms. And if he says today, no more yechidus, today I'm giving it to you a different way, I mean, you can't say, hey, I want it the way I want it. That's the way he gives it. So, let's go on here. Okay, so that's tfunos. Okay, gam inyan mispra shalei sofer. Another thing, this idea of number that can be counted. Hu sheneshamis Yisrael mamshichim gam b'mispra she'eh b'chinas lei sofer. This is also like an event that neshamis Yisrael, the souls, mamshichim, they draw down that in the world of number. There we go. The world of number, of quantity, there should be a state of lei sofer that's higher than number. Dini lepam ksiv alomas ein mispra. Alomis. You say almis or almus? I think alomis. Alomis and mispid is talking about. Aloma is the psulis. Yeah. But it says alomis. It says I think alomis. I don't know. So sometimes it says alomis ein mispid, and the Gemara says al tikra alomis ela elamis ela ve'elamis. She'elamis yibchin bli mispid. That the elements, which on their own is a gvul, is mispar, should be in a state of higher than mispar. The worlds are in a state of number and definition because their root is in the containers. But neshamis Yisrael, souls, mamshichim, they draw down shir gam elam b'chinas bli mispar. The world shouldn't be beyond number. This comes through Teda. The Teda b'chinas chachmei lo b'chinas chiyui. This is the level of Teda, which is supernal wisdom, which is the level of chiyui, like you said before from the Siddur. Eir v'alkein al yedei esek Teda. That's why through exertion in Teda lamata below mamshichim b'chinas eir v'agili be'elamis, you draw down the energy and the revelation in the worlds lias gilead and sov be'elam to reveal the divine infinite light in the worlds. So this is through Teda. So Teda is Eir, Chachmei Law, and that draws down the Bli Gvul. Yeah, okay, that draws down the Ein Mispir because it's Eiris. V'gam Neideshat Teda Mumutze Ben Eir and Sof Le'elmas. There we go, interface. It's also known that Teda is the interface between the infinite light and the worlds and existence. V'yesh Ba Beis HaMadregas, and it has within it two levels. We learned this all the way in the beginning of the Hemshech. It has in the two levels Eir v'Salma. Shuyin Eir v'Salma. There's two levels, Eir and a garment. Like we say, Eiter Kesalma, the Teda. Like who says elsewhere, and we'll explain it later. So Teda has two parts. That's the Mamutza. So Teda has in it the element that's Eir, and Salma is like a Keli. Primis Keli. And that's why Teda has the power to draw down and to create the world, and then the world's become in a state of beyond number. This is Shishim Malchus. 60 kingdoms, these are the 60 mesechtes and Gemara 60 tractates. V'alomis ein mispar. That's the pasuk. Al tikra v'alomis ela ve'elamis. Don't call it alomis, ela elamis. What does it mean? Shadei Teda, which is Shishim Hem Mesechtes. Shishim Mesechtes, through Teda, you draw down, Mamshichim Be'elam, you draw down into the world, Gam B'chin is Bli Mispar. So that's the Hemshech. Shishim Hem Malachis, V'alamis Ein Mispar. Elamis Ein Mispar. Yeah, Malachim Mesechtes, yeah. V'chem Mamshichim Adei Tshuva, and the same thing you draw down through Tshuva. Dini'in HaMispar B'chin is Galus Canal. Mispar is connected to revelation. We said, remember Tehu. When it's not revealed, it's not defined. In a place that's concealed, you can't have a number. Like we say about the fish, somim min ayin.
Closed box, they don't know what's inside.
Right. That means that v'sham, in the concealed place, the sisum, the number is a number, but you can't count it. That's a good example, actually. It's a number you can't count. In other words, the number is concealed, even though it's there. So Atzilus reveals the number that's concealed, even though it's there, but it's going to reveal it. Okay. V'atshuva magas b'chinas hasosim v'nelam dafka. And tshuva reaches into the concealed and hidden, specifically. Which means mamakim korasicha. From the depths, I will call out to you, dinyan atshuva b'nefesh u'be'emek hanefesh. Because tshuva in the soul comes from the depths of the soul. V'chem magia l'mayla b'chinas emek. And also reaches higher b'chinas emek dafka v'sosim v'nelam. So it's like a emek mata emek maila, mamakim. That it reaches into the concealed, the depth, and the concealed and hidden, specifically. That's why also through tshuva we draw down higher than number into number. Let me just finish the Maimon already. According to the above, we'll learn shemini is the level of bina. 8. It's the 8th Sefirah from the bottom. She Timino Malmatla because it's number 8 from the below, from Malchus, counting to Bina. This refers to the inner dimension of Bina. Like it says, Lukotera, the Maimed Bina Shmini Atzeres, Smeli Tachas L'Reishi. V'hainu, what is this level of Bina? B'chinas L'Tfunose in Misper. Bina is Tfuna. That means the Primis of Bina. Like he said before, Tfunose, to your comprehension, there's no number. The Tfuna, who B'chinas Primis V'Atzur Samech. Tfuna is the inner core elsewhere he explains that Tfunase, your intelligence, is the Tfuna all the way in Atzmos. This is also the meaning of Atzeret. He said shemini is bina, Tfuna, and Atzeret is also Lashon Klita. Atzeret means to retain, retention, to be kelit. The Klita is Tfuna, because Klita, retention, isn't Tfuna. Ish Tfunis Yadleno. Like it says, Ish Tfunis Yadleno. Yadleno is like like a pail that draws. So Tfuna retains. Bin Chachma is still not retained. So Bina retains. Atzeres, shemini Atzeres. K'mashkasa makamacha. V'amshachah sha'adei avodah Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippur sha'gilu b'chag ha'sugas v'ikar b'shemini Atzeres. And this is the amshachah, the transmission that happens through avodah and Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Its revelation is in Sukkos and primarily in shemini Atzeres. K'mashkasa tika b'chedish shev b'kas liyem chagenu v'lo yiksiv liyemei chagenu. That you'll blow shefer b'kas liyem. What's liyem chagenu? Yemei chagenu it should say. Which is Sukkos. L'yem chagenu the koyal shmini Atzeres, the yem echad. Shmini Atzeres is one day Yom Tov. Shadei kabol sel machzamayim v'tshuva Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur through the accepting the yoke of heaven and the return, the shuva and Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. You mamshichim, you draw down b'chinas atzmos ein sof, you draw down the essence of the divine light v'agili b'pnimis u'b'shmini Atzeres, and it comes b'pnimis. In Sukkos, it's still in the form of makiv, sukkah, schach. And shemini Atzeres comes down internally. It's niklat. It's retained. That means that the transmission is in the revealed keches, faculties of the soul, through the work all year round. That's what shemini Atzeres does. On Rosh Yom Kippur, the avodah primarily is makifim, chai yechida, which is the more transcendent forces of the nefesh. But all year round, the avodah is in the internal faculties, the immanent faculties. So shemini Atzeres is an interface, because it draws down the makifim of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur and Pnimius. So all year round, it's taki internal, but it's on a low level. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is a high level of avodah, and shemini Atzeres brings that into integrated, internalized way. That's bli misper and misper. So Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is bli misper. All year round is misper. Shemini Atzeres is the connection between bli misper and misper. That's interesting. That's the korban, the offering on Shemini Atzeres is one par. The korban of malchus. Korban is the level of malchus, which is that means the elevation of malchus. Shivim, right? Throughout Sukkot, you bring many cows, offerings. So in general, this is the outer dimension of the makif of the transcendent shanim shach lakel to everyone, even to all the nations. Shivim parim connected, shivim mumis and so on. Connected as it's known. Like anol malchus b'chadei. But shmini Atzeres, however, the transmission is the inner dimension of the makif, and that goes specifically to neshamis Yisrael. That's why it's par echad. V'akorban par echad ayel echad, one par, one ayel. Ayel is a bull, a ram. Par, cow, and ram. Shagam b'chinas malchus yeh b'chinas achdus v'yiskalash. That even in malchus, like he said, korban is malchus. That even in malchus, you should have the unity, v'yiskalas, and interconnectivity. That's the meaning that the number should be in a state of beyond number. This is what it says. The Shemini says. The Eibishter says, after all these being together, let's spend one more time together, one more day together. That the transmission is only to the souls of Israel. I will be with you alone and not with any strangers. With you. That this is the meaning of Yom HaShmini Atzeres that's called the 8th day. Even though it's a separate Yom Tov, Gemara says because it's the deeper, the inner dimension of Bina Gilib B'chinas L'Tfonose Ein Misper. Because it's the level of the Tfonose that your understanding has no number. That's drawn down in Shmini Atzeres in an eternal way. Like one, like the Rebbe said with Yud Aleph. That's why it's one. Not one as a number one, but one to show that it's not a number, it's beyond number. So it's a number that's beyond number. Kitzur, if you do it, the Eres del Maila,
You can understand the ganze Nekude von Shmini. The name was gesagt früher. That's what he's connecting here. So, Yom HaShmini Atzeres, Nikra Yom Shmini, Yom Yesh Regel B'Fnei Atzeres. For what is it connected to Sukkot?
Because it shows you again that it has number and no number. Shmini means it's connected to number, and Echad, yeah. Kitzur, the summary, if you do it,
why would we call it Shmini even though it's Regel B'Fnei Atzeres?
Right.
Yeah. Kitzur, the be'eres del ma'ala b'chinas riba l'mata b'chinas miyad. It's known that the eres energies above are called many, and below they're called less diminished. Be'kelim is the opposite, and the kelim in containers l'ma'ala miyut l'mata riba. Above it's diminished, and below it's many, multitude. V'ariba sheveres ena b'chinas ischalkus. The riba, when you say many in eres, you're not talking about distinction, you're talking about quality. Like in profound ideas where you don't distinguish the distinctions. And the multitude in containers, there it is actually distinction, structure. And that's what it means that higher than malchus is the number of energies. That's a ribui quality. But from that perspective, the kelim, the containers are in a diminished state. But malchus is the opposite. The malchus mispera kelim shuzeu haribui. There, the number of kelim is in a state of great magnitude. And the energy there is in a state of diminishment. Ubavedu the neshamas that silas ikra avedesim b'chinas neshmasam. In avedas, the neshamas of the silas, their primary avedas with their soul, meaning the animal, the divine soul. The neshama is the biyah, ikra betikun the nefesh habamis. Souls of biyah, the primary aved is repairing the animal soul. Bittul hayesh limsa nafresh be'echad u'b'chol nafshecha. To give your soul for be'echad and b'chol nafshecha. These two are the first two. Limsa nafshe be'echad, he said before, that's really the nefesh alakis. He says it afterwards. Yeah. And Chol Nafshech is Nefesh Habamis. But here he combines them, so maybe it's again an interface. This is meaning the number that can be counted. Malchus, that's in the spheres that are higher than Malchus. So that the understanding has no number. And also in Aveda, through Teira and Shuva, through Teira and Shuva, we also draw down that also the worlds, which is defined, should have a state of beyond number. This will understand Shmini Atzeres was his internal state of bina, that it should reveal also in the internal keiches faculties. And that's why the carbon of Shmini Atzeres is malchus, is the level of number that cannot be counted. So we see here that sefiros have in itself several dimensions, and that's all part of this interface, all in misper. Okay, so we concluded chapter 86, page 160.